Hey everyone, Eric Hayden here on YouTube. Did you enjoy the ice pictures? Had a significant ice storm here in eastern North Carolina over the last 24 hours. It was ironic because I did that video, the last video we did about chopping up the leaves and then protecting the roses. Most of that was just to get rid of that leaf pile. I didn't want it to go to waste, so I was going to put it in the garden anyway, but since it looked like we might have a couple more cold nights, I figured why not cover up the bud union. I'll show you some pictures after the video of how those bud unions look encased in ice with leaves and compost. Quite a sight. And it's ironic because I think it was one of our viewers from Connecticut had commented that I had shorts on doing all that work, but the weather's quite variable here. In fact, yesterday we were in the 60s, so kind of crazy weather, and then we had the ice, and then overnight temperatures in the 20s. Right now we're about 27, 28 degrees. So we don't have as harsh of winters as you do for those watching from up north. I used to live in upstate New York, so I know how cold it can get and how snowy it can get. However, we have very variable weather, and that's hard on the roses. So I'm kind of curious what's going to happen, not so much because of the ice. You saw some of the roses bent over, but more that we might get into the teens tonight and even single digits where they had snow cover. That would be an issue, and not as much the ice. So, did you enjoy the pictures? Again, the garden itself is looking snow or icy, not snow. This white that you see on the ground is actually not snow. My kids woke up this morning and got all excited. They thought it was snow. We actually had 6/10 of an inch of sleet and 3/10 of freezing rain. And that sleet was actually good news because our power was out for about 3 hours, but it's back on now. If this had been more freezing rain like we actually anticipated, that would have been potentially devastating. That, by the way, is a snowboard. I am a meteorologist, so I measured last night, and again, about 6/10 of sleet. So all that white you see is sleet. It was initially freezing rain, and then when it got heavier, it mixed in with the sleet, and that helped us. That's why it's not quite as slick this morning. Instead of a glaze ice, it's kind of a crunchy ice, as you can probably hear it. But nonetheless, I showed you some of those pictures of the roses. For the most part, they're just fine. I trimmed them in the fall. If you're anticipating a major ice storm and your roses are really tall, you might want to trim them more because they could bend over, and that's where you'd have damage. But all this ice accretion you see on the rose, that's not going to do anything to it. It's perfectly fine. And it's ironic, if you see these little red bud eyes, those have pushed out quite a bit because of that warm weather. Those may die, not because of the not because of the ice, but each bud eye, that's eventually going to be a cane. I did a video on this before. There's a dominant one, that's the central one, terminal one, and then there's two side ones. So it's kind of designed for cold weather. If that terminal or the main one fails, the two side buds would kick in. And a lot of this had already been damaged a little bit by some of those cold nights. So again, here's a dead cane here. Is the rose dead? No, we just prune all that out in the spring down to where there's green. So that's why even up in Binghamton, New York, where we used to live, I never did a real heavy pruning in the fall. Maybe a very light pruning so that the roses wouldn't rock back and forth in ice storms and snow and wind. But otherwise, I like to leave them kind of a medium height. That gives me a lot of rose to cut back if we have cold temperatures. If you prune really low in the fall, you're cutting out your margin of error. So if you get really cold, the dieback is going to be more substantial in the bush, and you're not going to have as much green cane in the spring. So that's why I do it that way. But nonetheless, a pretty morning. Again, you can see the ice accretion, about 3/10 of an inch. A little more than 1/4 of an inch. That's impressive. In all my years up north, you know, I've seen feet of snow, and I've seen 25 below, but I don't remember seeing 3/10 of an inch of freezing rain. That's a tremendous amount of freezing rain. It's hard to get in the atmosphere everything to work out, and you could see even here we had sleet. It's hard to get pure freezing rain that long to accumulate that much. So that will just about wrap it up. I don't know if you can hear in the background the trees. They're not cracking as in they're falling, but the wind as it blows through them. And I'm sure you can hear that crunch, crunch, crunch. But pretty neat video this morning to show you. And again, no damage or anything. This is Pope John Paul II. It was the only rose that was bent over, and it had the most leaves. But that's no problem as long as the canes don't break off. That's when you would have an issue. But I'll show some still pictures at the end. But I mentioned in the beginning the compost leaf mixture, and you can see how it looked. It'll help if we get in the teens tonight, protecting the bud union. Obviously it's frozen solid now, but some of those more tender roses like Marilyn Monroe. Sorry about that, my earbud fell out there with the wind. The tender one like Marilyn Monroe, that should help it. And even the ice, you know, will protect some of these I'm losing my train of thought with the lack of sleep the last couple days. It's been busy at work. With the bud eyes, that's what I'm trying to say. With the bud eyes, they'll actually be insulated. So I'm actually hoping we don't melt a lot of the sleet or ice today, so that if we're really cold tonight, we're kind of having an encasing. But any of this new growth, that's going to be see you later. I'll have to prune that out and probably prune down the cane itself. Comment below, what do you think of our ice storm? And I know you're probably laughing in the northern part of the country and you say that you call this a storm. When is the last time you had a 1/3 to 1/2 inch of freezing rain? I went to school in upstate New York and I lived there for a long time, and we never had that. I know in '98 they had a major ice storm that was more than this, but up to 1/2 inch of ice in some spots, that is very impressive no matter where you live. And I've mentioned it on videos before, I live 3 miles from the ocean, and I certainly wouldn't go swimming in the ocean today, but the water temperature is in the 40s, so it's really hard to get this cold at the surface to have this much freezing rain when you live that far, or you live that close to the ocean. Have a good one. I'll post an update here once we melt all of this off. We are expected to get into the 40s tomorrow and 50s next week, so this will be a short memory here in our area. I'll last leave you with this nice crunch, 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 because that's what sleet sounds like when you walk. Have a good one, everyone.